So I've been listening to an audiobook while mowing the lawn, which is Liberalism by Ludwig von Mises. And Mr. Mises is interesting. He's one of the economists who's behind the Austrian School of Economics, which is basically libertarian economics. And the nutshell is that the government is important, anarchy is bad because it's against human nature, and that we should pursue liberal policies of, using the old word liberal, meaning basically libertarian, use old libertarian policies in our economics and pursue the free market because it makes everybody richer. If you're in the bottom of the society, it makes you richer, it makes the total amount of wealth generated better, it makes everything better economically. Even to have large amounts of inequality still keeps production higher than it would be otherwise. And you want people politically free and having equal status before the law, because it produces this kind of utilitarian state where we have more freedom and more peace. And one of the things that he's mentioned and kind of insinuated, I actually really don't like, which is this idea that self-sufficiency breeds war. And I think that that idea actually has a little bit of merit to it, but I also don't think that it's a bad thing. So the argument goes something like this. If everybody's interest is dependent on everyone else, if I make only shoes and you make only bread and the next guy makes only cheese and the next guy over there makes only, something else that we all need, houses, and another guy's the plumber, then it's not in our interest, it's not in any of our interests to attack the other ones, because the others can withhold necessities from you, and you kind of need their cooperation in order to live. So it does not behoove you to attack anybody. And that kind of tied together economy has some serious advantages. It's got the advantage of disincentivizing war. Now here's what I don't like about that economy. And he says by contrast, it's important to get this contrast in first, that if everybody was a self-sufficient farmer who was able to produce all of his own necessities or her own necessities on a homestead, then you can start a war whenever you want. And there's nothing really stopping you. And if you think that it's in your best interest to rob somebody blind, you go for it. He's kind of evoking the Viking-style homesteads there, or, a old feudal approach where the towns occasionally had to prepare for war against the local countryside or against the neighboring town, and where power was very decentralized, kind of. Well, here's what I don't like about the interdependent, disincentivized structure for war. What I don't like about it is that you can be controlled easily with it. To say that you are disincentivized from war or conflict or speaking up even is true. But that means that you are much more likely to go along with flows that you really shouldn't. You are much less likely to speak out about things that you find to be immoral. You are much less likely to have a soul and be in a position where you can disagree or withdraw or say no. I do not believe that free trade is free unless it preserves the right to say no. And an interdependent economy I have no problem with. I have every intention of continuing to trade for things that I like, that I have no intention of making for myself. And some things that I can make for myself, I have no intention to make for myself because I don't enjoy it. But if I know how to make something myself, if I have the tools to make something myself, at that point I have a qualitative choice that someone who does not have that knowledge or does not have that tools can't have. Which is, if the prices get raised, I can quit. If the industry starts doing something immoral, I can quit. I have that card that allows me to withdraw. And that is a very, very mild form of war. We call that a boycott. But if you don't know how to make your own cheese, and the price of cheese goes up, you have two choices. Don't eat cheese, or, pay the higher price. If the price of all food goes up and you can't make it yourself, you have two choices. Stop buying food, or pay the higher prices. And for things that are necessities like food and shelter, if you're not in a position to produce it yourself, that means you're over a barrel. You are dependent in such a way that whatever happens, you have to accept it unquestioningly, or die, or go without to such a degree that it's not worth, that it would be bad. So if the price of that kind of limited autarchy, where people can produce for themselves, autarchy is being economically self-sufficient in a local area. It can be applied to a country, where a country can produce all of its own, or you could have, really local autarky. It does make you prepared for war and capable of war, capable of conflict, really, with your neighbors, whether that be through very mild conflict like boycott, or through greater conflict like siege. And do I think that's a bad thing? No, I don't. I think it's necessary, because otherwise we're all part of the same hive mind, and we have to accept things that we may find immoral, or prices that are intolerable, or we have no say in the order of the world. And I would rather have a say in my private corner of the world, even if part of that say is exercised through things like boycott and siege. Anyway, what do I think about the ideas of Viking-style raiding becoming common again? I think that would be really bad. I don't want that. But Viking-style raiding is less likely now than it's ever been, just because the weak can kill the strong now in a way that they never could before. There is an idea that I actually like in this kind of facetious quote that says, God did not make men equal, and then you fill in the name of some gun manufacturer and say he did, Mr. Colt did, or whatever. Because power is quite widely distributed now. It's not easy to raid, and that's good. I mean, even if you have a gun raiding, the fact of the matter is that guns make all men equal. So the strong don't have superiority in the same way that you would in a wrestling match, where a 10-pound advantage is significant. On a macro scale, I think this applies as much as on a micro scale. So one example of that is trade tariffs with China right now. The United States is highly, highly, highly dependent upon China for a lot of manufactured goods that make me nervous. One of those is pharmaceuticals. Most of our pharmaceuticals, like 90% of our active ingredients, are manufactured in China. And in the early days of the COVID pandemic, the foreign spokesminister of China threatened to throw the United States into the sea of COVID over some offense that we had caused, because China has some very large ambitions right now for territorial expansion, and to the degree that the U.S. conducts freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea or supports Taiwan or such, we tend to offend the Chinese ministry quite a bit. And they were suggesting that they were going to weaponize our dependence of those products, pharmaceuticals and medical gear of all kinds, which we are highly dependent on them for, and to use that for political advantage. Now, because we are dependent, we are in a position where we can have our foreign policy influenced by, and our own internal policy influenced by, a potentially hostile power, or just somebody else, just anybody else. And that position of being dependent makes me nervous. If you have something to lose, you can lose, and you don't want to lose, and so you tend to restrain yourself possibly a little bit too much. Another example of that is Hollywood, also with China. Many of the Marvel movies that have any influence in China, or subject matter covering China, or Chinese-sensitive topics such as Doctor Strange or Shang-Chi, or even Iron Man 3, had significant plot points changed in order to get through the censorship apparatus of the Chinese government, in order to have their film shown within the massive viewing market that is in China. And that desire to not lose the China market caused Hollywood to sacrifice plot and, to a certain extent, sacrifice their soul for the sake of not losing that dependence, not losing that thing that they were dependent on. And which means, it's a subtle thing, but that self-censorship that Hollywood is exercised in, it wasn't Chinese censors in the office saying what you can and can't say. It wasn't that. It was it was Disney executives and scriptwriters self-censoring to try to appease what they thought China would like. And I'm using China as an example just because it's been pertinent in the news recently, and it's a specific example that's kind of international in scope, and it's easy to conceptualize. But that same kind of self-censorship also applies with you at your job, where you limit what you say and what you think and how you dress and what you admit you like and all those things. And you don't want to ruffle any feathers, you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to cause any conflict because you are so highly dependent upon that paycheck. And it's that kind of self-censorship that I really want to get away from with the limited autarchy of homesteading. I think one of the main things homesteading will give you back is your soul, your ability to admit what you think and say it honestly, whatever it is, and to even think accurately. You don't have free speech unless you have control over your own supply of bread and housing. And I think that's where I would disagree with Mises. I don't see that massive interdependence and the self-censorship and lack of conflict that it creates as a good thing. I would rather see the conflict. I would rather see some minor conflict around, hey, you know what, I don't agree with you. I don't think I'm going to go that way, and not being in a position where you can be harmed by someone withholding from you. So that's my thought. Viking-style rating bad. Dependency for things that you need, like pharmaceuticals or food, bad. And I don't like the self-censorship that comes with dependence. To be a really free person, you have to be ready to quit your job over a moral stance. You need to be ready to lose a little bit. And if you can cushion that blow a little bit with some self-sufficiency, that's a good thing. It means that you're more likely to make that sacrifice sooner rather than later. Maybe even too late. Anywho, this is an area where I disagree with Mises. I don't want to see everything so interdependent that the local loses its say in terms of some larger pattern, whether that be national conversation or I'm worried about it mostly intellectually. Losing control of local identity, local language, local values, being forced to conform to say, you must believe this or else we can cut off your supply of bread. That's a problem. That is a problem. Even if that level of force is wielded for things that we think are valuable and good, like vaccines. And in principle, I like vaccines. The COVID one makes me nervous. And the reason for that is it was really quick, it doesn't seem all that effective, and I've had COVID 3 times, and so I don't really see the benefit for myself. Even though, in principle, I'm really glad we don't have smallpox and polio anymore. So, yeah. I appreciate the ability of a homestead to not conform, and to the degree that that invites conflict, let it invite conflict, bring it on. So, yeah. Homesteads equal war, and I'm okay with that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe below. It really helps the algorithm, and if you want to support our channel and help me eventually purchase a real homestead, which I'm saving up for at the moment, consider buying a spinning wheel. That would help me out a lot. I'm selling spinning wheels and wool combs and such on my Etsy shop. See you next time.